It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich, CEO of Massolutions, the world's only no bullshit marketing firm. And today, we not only have a special episode, but we have a special guest, the man who has had the most guest appearances on the No Bullshit Marketing Show, Tom T-Rod Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, Dave.
You ready?
Yes, and I'm proud to be number one.
You're beating Carter out. You two have always
quite
been neck
quite
and
a
neck.
distinction.
And I think this is your sixth appearance, if I'm not mistaken. And today's episode is special because I was inspired by an email that I received and a text about a month ago. So a little bit of background. Tom and I both have had basketball be a big part of our lives as players and coaches at a young age, and then coaches as dads. So we're coaches who happen to be dads, not dad coaches. And there's a blog post I have about that is pretty significant because dad coaches are a bad thing and coaches who happen to be dads are a great thing. And I'm not saying that because I'm one of them. I'm saying in general, I've had my sons play for dad coaches, and that was always a challenge. And there's coaches who happen to be dads, and then there's idiots who coach as well. So that's a third category, and we've had a number of those. Tom and I ended up meeting each other when my middle son, and I guess you'd say, my middle son and your oldest, right?
Yes,
your
my
oldest.
Alec.
Yes, his Alec, and there are some similarities. Tommy and Brevin played against each other, so Tom and I met in fourth grade coaching against each other. And then we decided to do AAU for that grade, but I had already had an AAU program in place that Tom agreed to help coach with that group too. So let me explain the email. I get an email from a man by the name of Brian Gorney, and Brian Gorney, a very successful executive, sends me an email that says, I just want you to know the impact that Massolutions AAU had on his son and two other players that were of our core 7 that were with us about 8 years. And these 3 players had all played in the NCAA Division III tournament, so the equivalent of the March Madness. And his son was one of them, as was Ryan Norkus and Anthony Bomar. And then about a week after that, I get a text from someone saying, did you see this? And it was a video when Ryan Norkus was named the person at La Roche who most exemplified La Roche College's vision and values as a student, an athlete, and a person who gives back. So those two things combined, and I said, Tom, we have to now do the story of the 2015 class of 2015 Massolutions AAU team that we were with together for about 4 years or 5 years, and I think I ended up coaching them 8 years. And we had a core group that most of them were with us the whole time. A couple came later and still made a huge impact. But that team I've coached since college and so forth, and other things that I'd done. I coached at a very young age and got the chance to coach some really great teams. Then I began coaching again in my mid-30s, had some other really good teams, but then I started coaching Alec, my oldest. And so I've had thousands of games that I've coached and had a lot of great teams, a lot of championship teams. This is the most unique team that I was ever a part of, both as a player and a coach, because of how long we stayed together in an industry and environment that does not breed that. So the first thing I want you to jump in about is talk about how great AAU is as an institution, how awesome AAU is as an institution, how it's just all for the right reasons. Sarcasm noted.
Right. Well, at one time it was when you and I played, Dave. I mean, AAU was unattainable, unfortunately for me. I don't know about for you, but I say it all the time. I'm jealous of the opportunities these kids have nowadays, because even though the AAU brand has been extremely watered down, it still gives these kids an opportunity to get better. That's something that I didn't have. It's something you didn't have. AAU in its purest form, which I don't even know when it started, but I know when I was playing high school ball, even junior high ball, I mean, only the best of the best, potential Division I athletes, players, played AAU. It was like an all-star team back then. And, since then,
What happened is the LeBron era hit to make AAU even stronger from a standpoint of the top tier players. So it was really gave AAU power and took some power away from high school coaches, which was probably good initially to take some power away from high school coaches. But now there's like way too many hands with power for the top tier players. But for the Division II and Division III players, there really wasn't a whole lot. Division II players there were, because I know that I remember getting a letter to come to an AAU tryout and being a part of that. It was a highly selective process to even get that in the previous generations. Whereas when we came back, when I first wanted to have an AAU program, I remember 5-star basketball was this program that was great when we were coming up, and I saw that we were going to be playing against this 5-star basketball team, and I had just hobbled together this Massolutions AAU team. Weren't even going to call it Massolutions. I had no intent when I was filling out the thing. It all started with Darrell Porter. So Darrell Porter and I had known each other, former City of Pittsburgh player that was great, then played at Pitt, and he also has been involved with the community and known Darrell, played with Darrell, pickup and so forth. And he had said to me, sit down, we'll start filling out this application. He goes, what are you going to name it? And I didn't know what I was going to name it. So I just said, just throw Massolutions on there, because I'm going to subsidize it, because some of the kids won't have the finances necessarily to play. So we'll just throw our name on it. So that's how it became Massolutions. It wasn't really intended to be the sponsorship for the company. So the first tournament we go to, it says we're going to play 5-star basketball / Basketball Stars of America. So I tell the parents, okay, we're going to get shellacked, because we're this hodgepodge of kids from a suburban school, most from one school, and then one kid from 3 different schools to get to the top, to the amount of kids we had. The parents are like, oh, don't underestimate our kids. Don't underestimate our kids. I said, I'm not underestimating our kids. I said, 5-star basketball is an amazing brand that was this great guy by the name of Morgan Wooten. And it was just this, I think that might have been the name. If not, I'm confusing him with the DeMatha coach. But the guy's name is...
no, that's him.
No, it's Garfinkel. That's it. DeMatha
Okay.
coach is Wooten, but Garfinkel.
Right.
Howard
Okay.
Garfinkel is 5-star basketball. So we come to the first game, and we go out and we pound this team. Well, it said 5-star basketball / Basketball Stars of America. And what Darren Friedman, a true businessman that owns BSA, was brilliant, and most people don't know this, but Darren bought the rights to that name for a couple of years. So all of the parents who knew that 5-star basketball was incredible thought, let's go ahead and have our kids play there. And here BSA was more of a get a bunch of people, turn it into a business. It's a business. He's making a profit on it. So his goal was to get a bunch of people and a bunch of teams, play a bunch of tournaments, and not be so worried about the premier, whereas 5-star basketball was the exact opposite. Premier program, only at one team in each area and so forth. But we as parents all remembered 5-star basketball. So he had 5-star basketball / Basketball Stars of America for either 1 year or 2 years, starts building the brand, getting people to sign up. And he is the epitome in this region of what is a challenge for AAU basketball. And I don't say this to be mean-spirited. I know Darren. I think he's a hugely successful businessman. But his model is volume. And so those teams are often, in the younger ages, not particularly strong. So here we were, a team that barely could put our team together and had maybe 5 practices, and we go into our first ever AAU tournament. We blow them out by like 20, and the parents are all telling me, you're Joe Paterno. You were telling us we were going to lose. And I said, well, I thought it was the 5-star basketball brand.
It's a good story, Dave. I like that start. And that's the one thing about this 2015 team, is for a team that essentially was just picked up by you and recruited by you. They were highly competitive with the best teams that we saw, no matter where we went, and that doesn't really happen anymore, few and far between. But that team there, for really a bunch of local kids to compete really at a national level. You didn't travel as much nationally as much as you did regionally, but that's what made that team special. They were average Joes.
Well, they were a suburban program in a weak suburban basketball place. The Whipple was not a strong basketball environment. It's not like Cleveland that has a strong basketball environment. But Whipple has decent football. Used to be great at football. decent football now, and basketball would be considered below average. Now, not below average compared to, Du Bois or
anywhere else in Pennsylvania other than Philadelphia.
Philly, but across the country, in other states, there's definitely markets better than the Whippeals. So to take a team like that and truly compete nationally at the King James Classic, getting to the Final Four at the King James Classic, which that's a pretty premier tournament. That's as national as you can get. And they were scrawny too. That's the other thing. We didn't have the 6'10" white guy. We had
we didn't even have a 6'5" white guy.
Yeah, exactly. And that era was still when you needed big men. You don't need big men today because if you have big men now, they're stretch 4 and so forth.
Correct.
But back then, you still would have the opponent would put their butt on the block, and their biggest guy would get the ball on the block, and Ryan Norkus, our biggest guy, would be covering a guy 5 inches taller than him.
Right.
So, well, a couple of things about AAU basketball: people don't stick together. Kids play on multiple teams. We kept it where those kids only played for us. On the 2015, by the 2017 class, they wanted to play for multiple teams. By Carter's class, they jumped to a different team every year. Even though we had that team of Carter's group in 4th and 5th grade, were just really competitive, and Carter ended up going to a team that was nationally ranked after that in 6th and 7th grade and so forth. But the 4th and 5th grade versions of Carter's team were so really strong, but those parents wanted to go and jump around because that's what's happened is the environment has become that the parents and the kids are seeing it as a way to jump around. I've coached thousands of games and teams at different levels, high school, coached at college camps and AAU and school programs, had many championship teams, was fortunate to have a lot of good players, coaches win with players, and ended up being able to also teach and make some solid players even better, and just part of a lot of wins, a lot of success winning off and on the floor. And that's what makes this team so unique because they were successful on the court and they're now becoming young men graduating from college and so forth with jobs. And Ryan Norkus was named the person that most exemplified the vision and values of La Roche, the university he attended and played for 4 years. 2 other players also. Ryan played in the Division III national tournament, and so did 2 others, Anthony Bomar and Justin Gorney. And Tom, you got to be a part of that coaching staff, which also was something unique because we kept the team together for 8 or 9 years, and only a couple people left. A lot of people quit because one player was really good at football. By the time we got to 9th grade, he realized football was going to be his thing. Another guy just was lost interest in basketball. But for the most part, they all stayed with it the whole time and stuck with us, and so did the coaching staff.
Yes, and what another part of that story that I find quite unique is the connection, the Bell Vernon connection, because I'm from Bell Vernon, and your recruitment of Travis Snyder, because the vast majority of your team was the South Hills team.
Oh, yes.
With Bethel Park players, added Gorney later from South Park,
yes.
Right? So you just so happened to be coached. You coached a game against Travis,
well,
right?
The story goes like this. So I'll go to the Travis story first, then I'll come to how everything started. So the Travis story starts this way. I was kind of fortunate that my oldest son was in a class at Bethel Park that was top heavy with good athletes. And they had a couple ones that were a step above, but they had a lot of good athletes. So a high volume, 25 to 30, when you normally probably have 10 to 15. So what that meant was that the actual competitiveness and the parents, there was a lot of backbiting and so forth because it was difficult to pick the A team, the B team, and who was going to be this, who was going to be that in both football and basketball that I coached, and I'm sure it was the same way in baseball. Now, those teams just turned out to be pretty good because a good portion of those 25 didn't dedicate themselves enough, and so they ended up being good. They didn't win the Whippy or anything like we thought they might contend for. But at that time, I was coaching one of the teams that Bethel had, and they had actually put together 3 teams at the metro level. So I'm coaching this one team while I'm also coaching Brev's team, and Brev at the time was in 3rd grade, and he was on the 4th grade team, and I was asked to help with that team. So I said to the guy who was coaching with me on this team, I said, now look, I can't go scout this other game, this Bell Vernon game, to who's going to get to play in the championship game or the semifinal. I can't remember. I said, you just need to coach this team. I'm going to be at another game. Just text me. So I'm at this other game, and this is right when texting began, actually, because I remember this one of the, I was still barely understanding this concept of texting. So I get a text. I'm at this other game, and I get a text that says, "We got this," meaning we're going to win the next game. And I go, "You really?" He goes, "Definitely." I go, "You sure?" He writes back, "Yes." I said, "What do they got?" And he goes, "Nothing." And I said, "Nothing." And he writes back, all caps, "Nothing." And I say again, I say, "Nothing?" with 3 question marks. And he goes, "Not one player." So now if you're a basketball person, I can walk into a gymnasium, and so can you, and so can all kinds of coaches. This does not make me premier or anything, but I think a lot of good coaches can walk into a gym, and during the warm-up, when they come out from the gym doors to come onto the gym and they run, I could probably pick who the starters are of both teams. And I could probably pick the best player on both teams before they dribble a basketball. And I used to say, I could do a tryout, just let them run. And the parents would get mad at me. And I'd say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll wait till they dribble twice. But I'm going to be able to know. So we're standing at the game now, and this coach is there who typed in "nothing" with all caps. And the warm-up's starting, I go, "Nothing." And he goes, "Yeah, nothing." I go, "That kid right there is better than Joey." And Joey was our best player. And he goes, "What?" I said, "That kid right there might be the best player we've seen all year." And he goes, "How can you tell? He's dribbled in, did one layup in the layup line." I said, "That kid's going to score 20 points. And I go, "I now have to go and try to figure out a junk defense to stop this kid." And he goes, "What are you talking about?" He goes, I watched them. They barely beat St. Clair, and we beat St. Clair by 10 or something. I can't remember what the team was, so I'm not picking on St. Clair if it wasn't, and some St. Clair class of 2015 guy hunts me down. But we go into the game, and we proceed to lose 29-27, and he has 27 points. So I go over during at the beginning of the game, and I say, "That number 25, what's his name?" And they go, "Snyder." And I go, "Snyder." I go, "All right." So the game ends, and I said to this guy, that was the end of the season, I said, "Hey, nice coaching with you. I'm never going to coach with you again." Because, this was back when I was really an ass, because I'm still an ass now, but I was really an ass whenever, Alec was only in 5th grade. I just went, "Nice knowing you. Hope I never see you in a gym again." And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "I could have prepared for this if you'd have told me they had a stud." So I go, and Eric Andrews, who had coached rec with me and Metro with me, and decided we're going to do this AAU, I say, "Eric, you know that guy that coaches high school at Bell Vernon, right?" And what was the high school coach before DiGregorio?
That was
he had 3 kids. One was
John Dudzinski.
So he says, "Yeah, Dudzinski," and he knows the kid named Dud or whatever, JD. So he says, I'll get the info from JD. So he texts me back, and he goes, "Here's the number. His name's Bear." And I text back, I go, "Barry." And he goes, "Bear." And I go, "Call me." So Eric calls me. I go, "What's the guy's name?" He said, "Just call him Bear." So I go and I dial this number, and I go, "Hear this, hello." And I said, "Hi, I was calling for Bear." And he goes, "This is Bear?" And I go, "My name's Dave Mastovich." He goes, "Who?" And I go, "Dave Mastovich." He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "I'm forming an AAU team. Your son is fantastic. He beat our team the other night single-handedly." And so I said, "Would he like to play AAU?" And that immediately gave us credibility, because we had him and Joey, who I'll get to in a minute. But what Travis, at a young age and before he got injured, because basically at Bell Vernon, Travis was the combination of Michael Jordan, Babe Ruth, and Tom Brady for Bell Vernon. So they just said, "You're going to play every play." He's in 9th grade, playing the entire JV game, half the varsity game, and I'd go to games going, "Why are you playing him JV if you're going to play him almost the whole varsity?" And then in football, they would just be down 35-0 to TJ, and they go, "Just roll out and sprint and see if you can break your leg." And sure enough,
tore his ACL
twice. But this guy just had a head for athletics. I'll let you talk about him, because you saw him more from Bell Vernon, but I just thought he was spectacular.
It's one of those good old-fashioned, he's just a natural. He's gifted, truly gifted. I mean, you take the kid at 5 or 6, you give him a ball, he can put it in a hoop. You give him a football, he can hit someone going across the middle. You pitch a baseball to him, he'll knock it to the moon. He's a kid that, is a coach's dream, because Travis really didn't need coached a whole lot either.
No.
He was just a natural. You see kids like that, you see like a couple a season. If you go both boys and girls, like last year on the girls' side, it was the Marissa girl. Just absolutely gifted.
Yep.
And whether or not they're coaches, certainly they make a difference in the kids' lives. You made a difference just by finding him, or who knows if Travis would have ever even played AAU, but it just, and on top of it all, he's a great kid.
Amazing.
What he went through, tearing his ACL twice, and his attitude was always very positive. He always had that wry little smile and that twinkle in his eye. He just an amazing kid.
My favorite Travis story is we go to a big tournament. It was either in Cleveland or it might have even been farther away. And we make it to the championship. And I was pretty, I was vocally positive, but I was usually pretty calm because I kind of could see whether we were going to win or lose during the warm-ups. And if I thought we were going to lose, that didn't mean I was dejected. I would just say, okay, we're going to get creative. But some of the worst games to coach are when you go out and you look and you go, wow, these teams are pretty even, because then it's on you. A lot of games, it's not on you. You're like, if I just don't screw up and I get them in the right position, they're going to win. But when it's even teams, you're like, shit, I have to kind of be really on my game. And so I'm stressed, and you weren't around to calm me down because you were probably covering for me over with Brev's and Tommy's team. And we're playing, I'm going through the warm-up, and I sit down, and I'm just in my head going, okay, I'm watching their team. I'm going, I can see that kid. I'm going to need to do this. I'm going to mix this defense up. And Trav comes over, sits beside me. I'll never forget it because I'm sitting there looking like this, and he comes over and sits. I just look at him. I look back at where I'm looking. He turns his head just like me. I turn my head back. I go, Trav, what's up? And he goes, Coach, we got this. And he taps me on the ass. And I go, all right. So then at halftime, he goes, didn't I tell you? We were up 11, and we ended up winning the championship. But that's how Trav was. He was always relaxed and fun-loving. And had he not been injured, and one of the things that I admire about Trav the most is this. When you're the guy on a team, it's really difficult to go to another team and not be the guy.
Right.
And that was why, the first Heat team struggled, because Dwayne Wade didn't want to just hand it to LeBron. LeBron is such a giving deferential guy at that time, and so they didn't. It was a struggle that first year, and then it losing to the Mavericks. So Trav had been the guy in baseball, football, and basketball his whole career till these 2 injuries. He comes and he stuck with our team when his sophomore year he couldn't play because of the injury. So his junior year, it's his last AAU season, he comes back and he's a shadow of himself. I got choked up during games because I knew he was at that time, my weakest guy, and he was so great, but he still contributed and was crafty. He couldn't have the speed anymore, and he was crafty, and he didn't grow. He used to always be able to rebound a lot, so he couldn't really jump, and he had only grown to 5'10" maybe. So he was playing a 3/4.
And he wasn't starting. He was coming off the bench.
He wasn't starting, and he didn't mope, and he was still positive. And I just felt so great. I get emotional thinking about it because I remember as a coach, if you're any kind of person as a coach, you think about those things. And that's the problem with most shitty coaches. Right. They don't think about all the little things that matter. It matters who you announce last. So think about putting the best friggin' guy last, you dumbass. Yeah. I go to high school game after high school game, and I see a dumbass coach not do the introductions the right way. What are you, stupid? What, are you stupid? Are you stupid? I'm the guy, I'm last. This is across the country, these dumbasses. Oh, I don't want to show. You're a dumbass. You're a dumbass. That's all you are. You're being a dumbass because the kids all know. It's like when you don't start the best kids. The kids know.
Right.
The kids know who the best kids are. You think I ever didn't know what my pecking order was when I walked on the court? Mm-hmm. Ever? Ever. I could go play pickup right now, and I'm going to go, okay, I got 2 guys that are better than me, and 1 that's about the same. I'll pick one and then be on my team, and we'll be all right.
Yeah.
Okay, this game, I'm the best guy. This is going to be fun. Like, who doesn't know that? And these coaches pull that shit. But that's what was great about Trav, was I was actually sensitive to the fact that here he was coming off the bench and still contributing after being a shadow of himself because of injuries.
Takes a big person to do that,
It does.
especially a kid in today's world.
But that's what made the 2015 Massolutions team so special, is because we can go through each of the kids and talk about how special they are. But why this all happened, there's two people of why this all happened. And what all happened was Eric Andrews coached with me for a decade. Matt Wood coached with me for a decade. He was a young guy who at the time was about 25, 26, and I felt we needed street cred by having a young guy who was a basketball savant. This guy knew the fundamentals. He's incredibly basketball IQ. Dean Gilmore, one of the solid big men coaches in an era when there are no big men coaches, and just a great man. And then you, who were the comic relief and also could calm me down whenever I was too uptight. The four of us stayed together a long time, and it all started because of two people. So I'll get into one of those two right now. I didn't want to coach my sons. So my oldest is Alec, and I just didn't want to coach. I was in this mindset of I don't want to be one of those dad coaches, because I watched it my whole life. I watched dad coaches being lame. So I would play in these Bethel leagues, and the guy that ran the rec department said to me, I need you to coach a team. So he said, we have a day where they come up and we rate their height, we have them run, so their speed, and we shoot, dribble, and we rank them. Can you make that? And I said, no, I'm coaching football. We have a game that day. So I don't get to go see the people that all come out, but they give us these printouts. So Eric, I say, Eric, we got to go to this draft. So Eric and I walk into this draft, and there's a ridiculous amount of teams. I think it was like 10 teams, okay? So you're going to have like 10, and they said we're going to go this way and then circle back. So you draw cards, and we get probably the worst possible card. We get 6 out of 12. 6 out of 12, so it's going to go 1 through 6. We're going to go all the way to 12, then come back. So we're going to have the first 6th pick and the 18th pick. So I go through and I circle the 6 tallest guys, and that's going to be my first pick, because it's still in an era when height mattered, and also in youth sports it really matters. So I picked the 6 highest, tallest kids. I write down a couple football players I know. We go through. I get the first pick. So the first pick I ever make here is for a guy by the name of Steve Iben, who was taller than everybody, and he had red hair. And immediately Eric nicknames him Big Country from Big Country. Yeah, from Oklahoma State. So we get Big Country. It circles back and comes the whole way through. And I lean over to Eric and I said, it's getting close. Who do you want? He goes, Eric. He's very non-committal. Eric just goes, it's your call, coach. So I go, I'm taking the kid with the unique name. And he goes, who? And I said, Joey Mascaro. And he goes, Mascaro? I said, yeah, Mascaro. I said, I'm taking the kid with the cool name. So I go, Joey Mascaro. Now, there should be an ESPN show, 30 for 30, on how Joey was the 18th pick in the 4th grade Bethel Park rec draft. You're talking about the best player in this century from that school district, and he was the 18th pick in that draft. But it changed all of our lives, because once we got Joey, we went undefeated in that rec, and then we went as a rec team into Metro Travel Basketball Tournament, where everyone had been practicing together all year, running zones. We had only ever run a man, and we actually did really well in a Metro tournaments. And then we kept that team together for both Metro and took the core group of that team for AAU. And we won an exorbitant amount of games. But Joey Mascaro immediately gave us credibility. So then once you have Joey and you pick up Travis, you unknowingly have at that time before Travis' injuries, 2 of the top 20 players in that grade in the WIPIAL.
Easily,
So-
if not 2 of the top 5.
So at that time, without anyone knowing it, I kept telling Eric, I'm like, we're really good, but no one knows it because nobody knows these guys' names, and we're the only team that's coming from the suburbs that just looks a certain way. And so then but the second person, the number one reason why all this happened is Alec, my oldest. And Alec did a lot of stuff, good and bad, and he's a rambunctious young guy who's learned a lot. But the fact of the matter is, none of us meet each other if not for Alec. And that team never gets together if not for me drafting Joey, and Joey being who he is. And then Trav gave us instant credibility. So they're the 3 pillars of the team. They're the big 3. You have to address Alec, though. You have to talk about that.
Well, I mean, Alec, to talk about Alec in the purest basketball sense is we, I mean, very fittingly, we call him Rodman, and Dennis Rodman, he was a fire starter. He was a kick starter. He just, and this was before he, went off the edge. This is before he became a freak. He was just a basketball player.
Yes.
And he cared about nothing other than doing what he could do. And that's the way Alec played, and high intensity, I mean, and I wouldn't say that Alec necessarily, well, I guess maybe he did a little bit, but exactly like Dennis Rodman. I mean, he was a key cog of the Massolutions group. He's a guy who wasn't afraid to mix it up. He hustled. He was the first guy on the floor. He was the first guy if things, got a little tense between the teams. He was the first guy in, the last guy out. I mean,
he was
that's
the
way
enforcer. If somebody,
right.
if somebody messed with somebody.
well, and the thing is too is Rodman knew his game and what he was good at, and that was the beauty of Alec. Alec knew what he was good at. He never tried to do more than what he thought he was capable of, and that's why he gave the team a spark. I mean, he was the one, if not maybe the only guy that played with a bit of an edge. The 2015 group, I think they were so good that, some kids need that little edge to get them going, need something to happen to fire them up. Most of that team was just so good, and they were also so much in control of their emotions, either because they were laid back or, that was just their personality. Alec was the one guy that we had that, in an instant might take offense to something or might feel like we need a little kickstart or, he could get us going. He could get things done.
The one thing about Alec that, this might become a surprise to you, Tom, but he frustrated me a lot. Yeah. But the thing that I always feel really proud as a dad about Alec, and I can't say this for a number of the guys on that team. There's the 4 or 5 that were awesome, but there's other guys on that team that played differently depending on who we were playing, what the people we played looked like and what their size was like and the magnitude of the game. That never changed for Alec. If he was going to do a dumb play, he did it when we were winning by 50, and he did it when we were playing the best team in the country, and he did it when we were losing by 30.
Right.
If he was going to do a smart play, he did it against the team we're blowing out, and if he was going to make a big basket, he did it against the shitter, and he did it against the same people. So he made mistakes the same way and good things the same way, where there's other guys who were world beaters when we're playing the shitters.
Right.
And then the big good games, I'd look down the bench to call in, and they were tying a shoe or something.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a word that's not used as much anymore. The coaches like you and I value. It's consistency.
Yes.
He was consistent no matter who we played.
Yes.
I mean, there's just, and as a coach, when you're game planning, when you're making changes during the game, you have that guy who's consistent. Yeah. So that's a guy who's going to be on the floor for you. That you don't have to worry about matchups because he's going to play the same. It doesn't matter if you put Travis Snyder in front of Alec, he would defend him the same way as if you put Brevin Mastovich in front of Alec. He would defend him the same way. He really has no, that in a sense might be a bit of a gift. He really doesn't care who you are, and in sports, that's fantastic.
He would manage to get the other guy's best player to. Twice he got the other guy's best player to punch him. 2 different games they got them to punch him. And the one time they threw them both out, and it was, I'm not going to say names, but it was one of the best players around for years. And I leaned over to you and I said, damn, that's a great trade.
Right.
Our 5th or 6th guy for their best guy.
And although you and I are thinking that way, Alec wasn't.
No.
He really didn't care who it was.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, he didn't realize, I don't know if we even told him afterward how valuable that was, that what he did for the team.
Yeah.
Because Alec played the same way.
Yes.
So
that's 3. That's the big 3. It all started because of Alec. None of it would have happened if not for Joey being the 18th pick in the draft. It'd be sort of like the Brady
He'd
thing.
have barely made the B team in the Metro League being the 18th pick.
He'd be like the Tom Brady 6 or 7 quarterbacks selected before him. And then, of course, Travis Snyder. So let's go through a couple of quick things on the memories. I asked you this question, and I asked Brev this because Brev, my middle son, is phenomenal at remembering things, and he's also extremely objective and very self-aware. But I said to him, Joey's best game of his life. And I said it to you and him, and all three of us say the same game. And it's down at West Virginia when the fire alarms went off.
Yeah.
And we were down 19 points. The fire alarms go off, and I said, guys, they're actually not better than us. Let's just keep chipping away at it. If we get a little run, we'll win. We ended up winning by 19, and Joey had like 39. Remember, he was just a frigging monster.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, we had a couple guys capable of performances like that in any game.
Yes.
That again, that's why the team was so special. You didn't need one guy. Joey didn't have to be great for that team to win.
Right.
Travis didn't have to be great. Norcus didn't have to be great for us to win games.
Well, in fairness to Joey, the greatest game that he played was against the top team, or one of the top 3 teams in the country in high school, against an undefeated Newcastle team, and he had 38 points.
Yeah.
Carried Bethel, and they only lost by 10, and that team barely.
I unfortunately wasn't at that game, but you told me about that.
He was spectacular. Joey ended up playing for Pitt, so he was a Division I walk-on, an ACC team, which that's just amazing for a guy that's 5'8", 5'9". I'll give you 5'10", Joe, because you might be listening. But to walk on and play for a team in the ACC at that height and weight, and coming from the WPIAL, he had a spectacular career. He was, as you said, really laid back on the court. He would get excited when there was a run offensively, but he was very calm. And so it was tough, because I would always talk to him. I'd say, hey, the best player has to lead a little bit. And he wasn't as comfortable with that, but he led in different ways.
Right.
So that's Joey. We already talked about the Trav and Alec issue. Let's talk about Ryan Norcus. What a man, huh?
Yeah, just quite a kid. I mean, when I got to know a little bit about Ryan and just his situation growing up, and that his essentially was raised by his stepfather and mother, and knowing that he just probably wasn't given the opportunities when he was younger that you and I were, or even our kids were given, and for him to just accomplish what he did. I mean, and again, I didn't know his stepdad all that well, but aside from being at all the games, but he was there for him. Like, he was his own. So I don't know what kind of a basketball guy his stepdad was, but his stepdad obviously cared about him enough to get him to the right places. And I'm just,
that's Jimmy Beccaro, and he would yell at me from the stands.
Yeah.
He'd go, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. Right.
One game he called, "Yeah, time out." Yeah. I said, "I only have 2 left, and it's the first half."
Yeah, right. Yeah. But the good thing about him was this, maybe, I don't know how much of it he really knew what he was saying or not saying, or just.
Yeah, good guy, fun guy. Yeah. He cared about my kids so much that he would yell at Alec and Brevin the same way he yelled at Ryan. And that might sound weird, like to this wimpy generation we're in, where you're not allowed to raise your voice and stuff. But that's not how it should be. Those people are just wrong. And he would actually he'd get on Brev when Brev was because Brev would play a great burst, and Brev's a little bit younger, but Brev would be driving the team, doing great. And then he just would do a minute of nonsense. Yeah. And during that minute, Jimmy would yell, so I wouldn't have to yell.
Right.
And he was there just to watch. That's how dedicated Jimmy was. He was watching the other grade.
Yes.
We had 3 teams many years and 2 teams every year.
Yeah.
And we had 4 teams one year. So we'd have 4 Massolutions teams, and I'd coach 4 straight games. It was great. But Ryan was just one of the most fundamentally sound players ever, because he was playing a big man position when he was never really that big.
Right.
He then worked on his shot to where his outside shot was really strong. He was arguably the second best, if not the third best player on that state runner-up 29-1 team from St. Seton LaSalle that won the WPIAL. And he was pushed off as almost like the 4th guy because there were 3 seniors. But he was really key to that team. Then the next year he was the main guy, really the only star, and took them to the WPIAL finals again. So Ryan was just a spectacularly fundamentally sound player. Calming influence. I used to laugh because he would go over and try to talk to Alec when Alec was in one of his fits of rage. He would try to calm Joey down when Joey was worked up. So he would listen, man. Every single time out, he'd be looking at me. Now, he might have not been listening, but he was sure faking it if he wasn't. But I think he was. And he was listening, and he would then go run the plays to perfection. Just a coach's dream.
He was. I mean, he played the big man position when undersized, number one, and number two, when undersized guys didn't play the big man position anymore. They learned how to be guards.
Yes.
You know, so he just was it's just a special kid, being able to accomplish what he did, basically starting on the inside and
Yes.
working his way to the outside.
Yes.
As an undersized, I don't know what he ended up playing, his college height was, but I know when he graduated high school, was he 6 foot?
Yeah,
6'1",
6'1", maybe. And he played 4 years of college.
Yeah.
At a pretty good college program. So here's how we find Ryan. We're talking about how we're going to get a big man, and this guy that's a client says, he's been telling me for a year he's got this big man that we want, And I say to him, all right, I'm finally going to go see him when he's close to Bethel. He's playing at some Catholic school in the parochial league, this school down by the Curry Hollow Road or something, and I walk in this ratty-ass gym, and I get Eric. I say, Eric, the 5 minutes away, we got to go see this kid. Maybe Bob Tokarski knows what he's talking about. And Bob thank you, Bob, was the guy who told me this. So we walk in, and I go, Bob Tokarski knows what he's talking about. Ryan runs up and down the floor and does a couple of moves, and I go, I got a big man. So then I go out in the parking lot, and I remember Jimmy would always have that like newspaper crumpled up no matter what time it was.
He liked to gamble.
To gamble, yeah. So he comes outside, and I come up to Ryan all excited, and Jimmy starts like interrogating me, like, what's your program like? What kind of offense you run? What's your defensive philosophy? And I said, we're in the parking lot, man. I'm asking your kid if he wants to play. You're not going to interview me here. So that's how we land Ryan. Then Brian Gorney, the guy I mentioned you that sent the email, calls me, and we have Ed Weedholder of Strength, Fitness, and Speed to thank for this. We're late in around 9th grade year, so we've got maybe 2-3 seasons left. And we're missing one piece. So it's just like that, being a general manager of a really good team. I'm looking for that one missing piece. I want that guy that can cover everybody, the guy that can score, the guy that's got a big body. And I'm not thinking I'm going to find it. It's late, so I'm calling around. I'm just trying to find people. And Ed Weedholder texts me and says, I think you should meet Brian Gorney. So Brian Gorney calls me. I still have the voicemail. And he says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about my son. We're frustrated with our AAU experience for the last 2 years. We've seen you guys. We just love the way you guys look, the way you play. You play as a team. So we meet at the Brugers in South Park Shops, and I just think this is going to be a fit. And first practice he comes to, he's about 6'3", can leap, he's fast, can cover. I would
shoot the three
like you wouldn't believe. He ends up playing in the NCAA tournament for Division III. He brought us, when I ran a 3.2, because of our size limitations, I could put him at the top in that 3.2 and slide him back and top, and he could create havoc for someone shooting a 3 but slip in and stop if they tried to go in the middle against a 3.2. And that perimeter was now Joey, him, Alec, Trav, those guys, Anthony, all hitting shots from the outside. And you had Dan Bright inside, you had Sammy Volpatti. So that's how we got Justin Gorney. Now, Justin Gorney was, when he was, just describe how that first year when he came, because he didn't say a whole lot.
He didn't say a word. And somehow, like, that's the other part about that group. The group prior to him, you add a piece to the puzzle, and it's like he was with us the entire time. So, I mean, the kids were just great that way. If there was ever any dissension amongst them, it never lasted past the huddle, ever.
I know.
I mean, I never saw it really during games. I never saw it after games. I never saw it in between games. They're just, and that's a testament to their characters as individuals as well as basketball players.
Yep. We had guys leave. Sam Volpatti left. He asked to come back, and we gladly took him with open arms. He was a good player. Dan Bright was like around my house all the time, really close with Alec, was a big man. But I have to talk about a guy who I saw and knew was going to be spectacular, and knew he was going to be a coach someday, and knew he was going to be a coach on the floor when we were in that 4th grade year, and that's Anthony Bomar. Anthony Bomar was all arms and legs in 4th, 5th, 6th, even into 7th. And he also, because of that, wasn't formed as quickly at an early age as some of the other guys that were smaller and better dribblers and so forth. So he always was looking for a spot because you didn't know where to put him. You couldn't put him right at the point guard. He wasn't quite there yet. He wasn't shooting good enough to be quite at the 2. He was tall enough and lanky for the 3, but he wasn't physically enough. I stuck with him, and parents were so petty, and they would bitch about everybody. They pitched about every kid. But in those 4th, 5th, and 6th grade years, I would get some flack. But I would say to Eric and you and Dean, I would say, that kid understands the game. He has the basketball IQ. We're going to stick with him, and he's going to work at it. He's going to blossom at some point. And damned if it didn't happen his junior year of high school. Now, it happened for us on the AAU level, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. But his junior year of high school, his junior and senior year, he started every game, played like every minute. His assist-to-turnover ratio is spectacular in high school and college. He just didn't turn the ball over. You knew you were going to be able to count on him to run the offense. You knew you were going to be able to have him calm the other guys down. He could look over at me, and in a second we would know what to say to each other and what play was going to run. He was like an extension of me as the coach, and that's Anthony Bomar.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think of Anthony, I think of a quintessential point guard. Point guards of the 70s, 80s, even 90s, with a pass-first mentality. Point guards now, a lot of the philosophy is going toward, well, I want my best player to be my point guard so he can handle the ball more than anybody else. He gets more opportunities to score because he has the ball in his hands. I don't know if I buy into that. I'm all for the guy like the Anthony Bomar who's going to run the offense. He's going to know where everybody's going to be. He's going to know time and situation. He's not going to make many mistakes.
And I could put him on a 1 or 2 or a 3 because he had the longest arms around. He could cover so many different people, and he wanted to play defense. He and Alec were the 2 that wanted to play defense on that team.
Right.
Gorney, he played defense sometimes. When he played, he was spectacular. But Alec and Anthony liked defense.
Right.
And we needed that.
Well, and Anthony was in a perfect situation with Massolutions because he was a guy, was not a big-time scorer, okay, but we allowed him to develop as a true point guard, okay, and we didn't need him to have to score the ball, and it helped him once he finally got the minutes he deserved in high school, okay. He had to score a little bit there at Bethel.
But he had Joey.
Right, that's right. But he did. But he had Joey. So he was fortunate. But I don't know if he'd have been in a different situation where he would have been forced to score the ball early in his career if he would have turned out the same. It was just. I think it might have been too much to ask of him. He was not all that comfortable with scoring the ball, but he grew into that. But he was a point guard first.
Yes, a pleasure to coach. So I think we mentioned the ones that were there from start to the main core, Anthony, Joey, Alec, Travis, Justin, Ryan, Dan, and Sam Volpatti. Sam Volpatti, man, the guy, when he was in 3rd, 4th grade, he was just a whiz with the ball, still was a whiz his whole career. Didn't get a fair chance at Bethel. Some of it self-inflicted, but most of it just not getting a fair chance. It's like Alex. Some of it self-inflicted, but still not getting a fair chance. But Sam is one of those guys, just really flashy with the ball in a positive way. That wasn't a negative. Like flashy with the ball, like able to dribble and pass and find the guy. He and Dan Bright, the big man we had, would run a little bit of give and go stuff and little alley-oop stuff. Even in 6th grade, it was a pleasure to watch those two. And Dan was a scrappy guy too. He was big, 6'5". He was always our only big,
right?
And so,
and he didn't miss from the block. No. He knew he had the 4 to 6 foot bank shot down pat.
Yeah,
and I mean he knew his role. He knew his limitations. He did what we asked him to do.
I'd also have to mention 2 other people. Cole Griffin played for us 1 year, and he played up. And he was a 4th grader playing on a 5th grade team, and he was from Wash High, and he's just a spectacular player, played football in college, straight A student, great parents, truly tremendous parents, treated us with respect. Cole Griffin, really great guy. I'm glad I met him. But also Jake Seavey. Jake Seavey was with us all the way through 9th grade. He didn't play the last 2 years or maybe the last 1 year, I'm not sure. But Jake was just fun. He was another guy that he would lean over to me and say, "Coach, why don't you run this or why don't you run that?" And I just loved that he had that, and he had a lot of fun, and he contributed, and we were glad to have him too. So that's the Mass Solutions 2015 team coaches: Dean Gilmore, Tom Rodriguez, Eric Andrews, Matt Wood.
We had quite a melting pot of coaches. I thought we we pieced together quite nicely.
Yes.
I mean, you talk about me as being the comic relief. I kind of felt like we had, such a great staff. There wasn't a whole lot for me to do. So to keep the mood light was something that I excel at, especially with being friends with you. So I assumed that role, and I enjoyed that role. I didn't feel like, if I ever felt like there's something we really needed to do then I would do that. But we were well staffed.
You were really good on the game situations. You would just lean over and say, you know what, you need to get Alex some minutes to cover 22 or something like that.
Right. I mean, and again, I was, I kind of was able to sit back and just watch, kind of like as a fan. I mean, when you have, a couple coaches on the bench already and you're the head coach, I could just kind of sit back and, just like being a guy in the booth in football, you see certain things, we make certain adjustments. And I enjoyed that. That was it was very easy for me. I mean, you handled everything, Dave. I mean, I just showed up. So, how could I not love that?
We had the coaching, and I know this is run. Maria's given us the waving off sign because it's went long, and I appreciate her. She's correct. But the other coaches want to say real quick what was eclectic about it was Dean Gilmore is one of the top Whippeal referees. So I don't argue a lot. I don't chirp a lot, but I tend to argue at certain times about a call that I think's close at a pivotal time, so I might get the next call. But I don't
quip it.
I would like, and if it was really bad, I would try to agitate a little bit.
Right, but quickly.
Yeah.
You bang. You would jab.
Yeah. So
you were jabbing.
But where Dean was great is I could lean over as soon as it happened. I'd go, "Is that a bad call?" And Dean would go, "No, it's a good call." And I'd stop because Dean knew every call. So one time I was ready to start flipping. I went, "How can you?" And Dean's going, "No." And I went, "All right, whatever." So
Dean the Dream.
Dean the Dream. And then Eric was the contrarian. He was always like giving you the other side. But Eric also always had the best one-liners. Eric would just come up with a one-liner during the chalk talks. Matt Wood was incredibly enthusiastic. I remember
he was our young guy.
He was our young guy, and he would stand up with the towel, make those guys hand the towel to the guy they were going in for and shit. He just did little things like that. But he also would go out and run the drills with such fervor that the players were like, holy shit. And then you would go and do this thing, like I would be kind of serious at practice, and I'd be doing the talks would be life talks. I'd be explaining something about life, and then I'd be talking about what we're going to do with the next team. Right when I get done, then Tom would come up, and I'd say to each coach, "You have anything to say?" And Dean would go, "Well, I agree with what Coach Mass said about X. We got to." Dean would naturally go down the big man route, and then Eric would go the shooter route. Eric would say this, and then Matt would typically go defense, and you'd come up and you'd just contradict whatever I'd say.
Either that, or I'd say like something like off the wall, like who's in charge of the adult beverages for the weekend. Say something like that.
Yes. So that's what he did. And you had the best line ever in a timeout. You want to tell that story, or is that one too risque?
Oh, wow.
Maybe we shouldn't tell that.
No, we'll just leave it. Go in case Joey's listening.
Yeah, exactly. He knows. The whole team knows this. The team now knows what that story
Dan Wright's laughing if he's listening to this
well,
right now.
Maria, you have to make sure you go on LinkedIn and get all these names: Dan Bright, Anthony Bomar. Anthony Bomar's connected to me. I think so is Justin Gorney, so you can at them or whatever so they hear it. But special issue episode of the 2015 Massolutions AAU team. It's the greatest team I've ever coached from a standpoint of the whole ball of wax. The personalities of the coaches, the personalities of the players, the success on the court, and now the success we're seeing off the court. So we thank you, all of the Massolutions AAU 2015 parents and players. They're all no bullshitters except Tom Bright. You're a bullshitter, Tom. I love Tom. We should.
But you're right.
We could go on for another hour.
Tom wouldn't dispute that, I don't think.
So thank you for listening to the No BS Marketing Show. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea, and build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.